He was not born into silence, he was born into fire. At 58, Gordon Ramsay stands as one of the most recognizable chefs on the planet, a figure whose voice can rattle a kitchen as easily as it can command millions of viewers at home. His empire stretches across continents, with Michelin stars glittering above his name and television franchises turning him into a cultural icon. For many, Ramsay is the embodiment of perfection, the iron-fisted leader who transformed the modern perception of a chef. But glory never tells the whole story. Behind every plate of immaculate artistry lies a battlefield of rivalries, betrayals, and scars that time has not erased. Ramsay's rise was not only a story of triumph, but also of conflict that tested his loyalty, his patience, and his very identity. The kitchens that crowned him were also arenas where friendships collapsed and trust dissolved into anger. Mentors became adversaries, protégés turned competitors, public figures clashed with him in the harsh glow of the media, while within his own empire, disagreements tore at its foundations. Each rivalry carried its own sting, shaping not only Ramsay's reputation, but also the man himself. At 58, Ramsay could look back not only at the empire he built, but also at the 5 names he could never forgive. These were the chefs who carved their stories into his life with the precision of a knife, leaving wounds that would not heal. And so the question remains, who were they? Who pushed Ramsay from admiration to animosity, from loyalty to loathing? Tonight, we peel back the curtain to uncover the 5 rivalries that defined the legend. Greatness is never forged in comfort, it is tested in conflict. For Gordon Ramsay, the path to culinary immortality was not only paved with Michelin stars and global acclaim, but also scarred by rivalries that burned as fiercely as the flames on his stoves. Behind the applause and television cameras, there were confrontations that shaped him as much as any victory. Relationships with mentors that shattered, protégés who turned their backs, peers who mocked him in public, and allies who became adversaries within his own empire. So the question is not whether Ramsay faced opposition, it is who left the deepest mark. Which names transformed from trusted figures into bitter enemies? Which clashes defined the man behind the legend? Tonight, we reveal the 5 chefs Ramsay hated the most, and it all begins with the one he once called a father figure. Long before Gordon Ramsay became a global icon, he was just another young chef trying to survive the blistering intensity of London's most demanding kitchens. And at the center of that storm was Pierre White, the youngest chef ever to win 3 Michelin stars, a man both revered and feared, known for his artistry as much as his volatility. To Ramsay, Marco was more than a mentor. He was a godlike figure, the standard by which all others would be judged. Their relationship began with admiration. Ramsay worked under Marco at Harvey's, a crucible where discipline was merciless, and mistakes were punished with icy stares or volcanic eruptions. Ramsay would later admit that Marco once reduced him to tears, an image that would haunt and define their bond. It was a brutal education, but Ramsay believed it was forging him into the chef he dreamed of becoming. But as Ramsay's own star began to rise, the balance shifted. Marco, proud and territorial, bristled at what he saw as Ramsay's ambition crossing into betrayal. The breaking point came when Ramsay claimed in interviews that his time under Marco was an ordeal, painting himself as a survivor of cruelty. For Marco, who valued loyalty above all else, it was a humiliation. The man who once called Ramsay his protégé now branded him untrustworthy. From that moment, their relationship collapsed. For decades, they would not share a kitchen or a kind word. Marco took public shots at Ramsay, calling him a liar. Ramsay retaliated with silence or with sharp, calculated remarks. The feud became legendary, master versus apprentice, father figure turned sworn enemy. And yet, the irony remains. Ramsay's uncompromising standards, his volcanic temper, even the mythos of his toughness, these were lessons he had absorbed in Marco's kitchen. In rejecting his mentor, he was also rejecting a reflection of himself. But as bitter as this rivalry was, the next one would unfold not in hushed kitchens, but in the glare of the media. It was a clash of philosophies, of fame, and of what British food could mean to the world. If Pierre White was the ghost of Ramsay's past, Jamie Oliver was the rival who battled him in the full glare of the spotlight. Their feud didn't begin in the heat of a kitchen, but in the arena of public opinion, Jamie, the naked chef, charmed audiences with rustic dishes, an easy smile, and a philosophy of making food accessible to everyone. He was relaxed where Ramsay was rigid, approachable where Ramsay was intimidating. And in those contrasts, conflict was inevitable. The first sparks flew when Ramsay dismissed Jamie's cooking as simplistic. For a man who had bled for Michelin stars, it was unthinkable that a chef with no fine dining pedigree could command such fame. Ramsay quipped that Jamie's success was built on personality rather than skill, while he himself had earned his place through relentless discipline. To Ramsay, Jamie represented a shortcut he could not respect. Jamie, never shy of speaking his mind, fired back. He accused Ramsay of being a bully, a man who mistook cruelty for leadership. He questioned whether Ramsay's fiery persona was authentic or a performance for the cameras. What began as a clash of culinary philosophies quickly spiraled into a war of words that tabloids devoured. Their rivalry spilled into personal territory. When Jamie's restaurant empire faced financial trouble, Ramsay mocked his failures. Jamie, in turn, jabbed at Ramsay's personal life, suggesting that behind all the bluster was a man losing touch with what truly mattered. For the British public, it was theater. Two of the nation's most famous chefs locked in a feud that blurred the line between entertainment and animosity. Yet beneath the insults, there was a deeper battle being waged. Ramsay embodied the elite, precision dining at the highest level, a world where excellence was measured in Michelin stars. Jamie stood for the populist vision of food, hearty, simple, democratic. Their conflict was not only about ego, but about who got to define the soul of British cuisine. And while their feud entertained millions, for Ramsay it cut deep. Jamie Oliver was proof that fame could be won without fire, scars, or stars. It was a reminder that the world did not always play by Ramsay's rules. But the rivalries only grew more personal from here. Because the next name wasn't a peer in the media. It was a protégé Ramsay had once nurtured, who would later turn against him. If Jamie Oliver was the rival who clashed with Ramsay in public, Marcus Wareing was the one who cut him where it hurt most, inside the Michelin world he prized above all. Their story began not in animosity, but in loyalty. Marcus was one of Ramsay's most trusted protégés, a young chef whose talent and ambition matched his mentor's fiery drive. Together, they conquered kitchens and earned stars, with Ramsay often praising Marcus as a rising force. For a time, they were inseparable, teacher and student, commander and lieutenant. But success has a way of testing bonds. Their relationship began to sour over the jewel in Ramsay's empire, the acclaimed restaurant Petrus. Wareing had poured himself into the restaurant, helping it achieve Michelin recognition. But as Ramsay's empire expanded, questions of ownership and credit became unavoidable. Marcus believed he had earned the right to claim Petrus as his own. Ramsay, fiercely protective of his brand, disagreed. The conflict escalated into one of the most notorious disputes in modern British dining. Legal battles erupted, words turned bitter. The mentor who once championed Wareing now stood opposite him in courtrooms and headlines. When the dust settled, Marcus walked away with Petrus under his control, a symbolic victory that signaled his independence. But the price was steep. The bond between Ramsay and Wareing was shattered beyond repair. For Ramsay, the betrayal stung more than any media feud. Jamie Oliver had been a rival from the outside. Marcus was family. He had invested trust, time, and belief in his protégé, only to see it dissolve into enmity. For Marcus, it was the cost of stepping out from Ramsay's shadow, of claiming his own place in the Michelin pantheon. Their feud became a cautionary tale in the industry. In the world of fine dining, loyalty is fragile, and ambition is unforgiving. Even today, the tension lingers, a reminder that some scars never fade. But if Ramsay thought the worst was behind him, he was mistaken. Because the next name wasn't just a rival in business, it was a fellow Michelin chef who openly challenged Ramsay's philosophy, striking at the very core of his culinary identity. If Marcus Wareing wounded Ramsay through betrayal, Michael Caines struck at something even more personal, his philosophy of food. Caines was no ordinary rival. He was one of Britain's most respected chefs, a man who had earned 2 Michelin stars and commanded admiration for his refined, elegant approach to cuisine. Where Ramsay thrived on intensity, boldness, and theatricality, Caines was deliberate, precise, almost poetic. Their styles were destined to collide. The tension began when Caines openly criticized Ramsay's approach to fine dining. In interviews, he suggested that Ramsay's brand of cuisine was more about spectacle than substance, designed to impress through aggression rather than subtlety. For Ramsay, whose career had been built on proving himself in the toughest kitchens on earth, these remarks were not simply professional disagreements. They were daggers aimed at his legacy. As their words echoed through the press, the divide sharpened into a philosophical battlefield. Ramsay stood for relentless pursuit of excellence at any cost, kitchens driven like armies, flavors that shouted. Caines stood for balance, grace, and respect for tradition. To many, their feud symbolized a broader question. What should define British fine dining in the modern age? The clash reached its peak when Caines doubled down, questioning whether Ramsay's empire had spread too thin, diluting the craft in favor of celebrity and scale. For a man who prided himself on maintaining standards across every venture, this critique was brutal. Ramsay, unsurprisingly, responded with his trademark fire, dismissing the notion that his food lacked integrity and bristling at the idea that anyone could question his commitment to excellence. Though their rivalry never devolved into the tabloid theatrics of Ramsay versus Oliver, it cut deeper in a quieter way. This was not about insults or personal jabs. It was about legacy, about how history would remember the chefs who defined their generation. In the end, their disagreement stood as a reminder that battles in the culinary world are not always fought with shouting matches, but with ideas, values, and visions of what food should mean. Yet even this clash of philosophies was not the end, because the final betrayal in Ramsay's story did not come from mentors, peers, or rivals in the press. It came from within his own empire. For Gordon Ramsay, rivalries with mentors and peers were painful, but nothing cut as sharply as betrayal from within his own empire. Stuart Gillies was not just another chef. He was the CEO of Gordon Ramsay Group, a man entrusted with steering the business side of Ramsay's culinary kingdom. Where Ramsay commanded kitchens and television screens, Gillies oversaw expansion, contracts, and the machinery that kept the empire running. For a time, their partnership seemed unshakable, a union of fire and strategy. But as the empire grew, cracks began to show. Differences emerged over direction, finances, and control. Gillies was pragmatic, focused on business realities. Ramsay was uncompromising, unwilling to sacrifice vision for balance sheets. The tension simmered quietly behind closed doors until it finally erupted into a series of disputes that shook the very foundation of the group. When Gillies departed, it was more than a resignation. It was a rupture. The CEO who had once been Ramsay's right hand walked away, leaving behind whispers of power struggles and irreconcilable differences. The media speculated, critics circled, and questions arose. Was Ramsay's empire as stable as it appeared, or was it vulnerable from within? For Ramsay, the sting was profound. Losing a protégé like Marcus was painful, but losing a lieutenant who had helped build his empire threatened his very legacy. Gillies' exit was not about stars or reviews. It was about trust, loyalty, and the fragility of leadership. The lesson was brutal. Enemies outside could be fought, but betrayal inside the walls was far harder to defend against. This final rivalry completed the arc of Ramsay's journey. From a mentor who broke his trust, to a peer who mocked him, to a protégé who defied him, to a critic who challenged his philosophy, and finally to a confidant who abandoned his empire. Each wound left its mark, but rivalries, as bitter as they are, also forged the man Ramsay became, relentless, hardened, yet undeniably legendary. 5 rivalries, 5 wounds that never truly healed. And yet together they tell us more about Gordon Ramsay than any Michelin star or television series ever could. From Pierre White, the father figure who became his fiercest critic, to Jamie Oliver, the rival who sparred with him in front of millions. From Marcus Wareing, the protégé who claimed independence, to Michael Caines, the peer who challenged his very philosophy. And finally, Stuart Gillies, the trusted lieutenant who walked away from Ramsay's empire. Each name left a scar, but also shaped the legend. Without Marco's brutality, there would be no Ramsay as we know him. Without Jamie, the world would not have seen the clash of elite perfection versus populist appeal. Without Marcus, Ramsay might never have learned the fragility of loyalty. Without Caines, his legacy might never have been questioned and sharpened. And without Gillies, he might never have realized that even empires built on fire can fracture from within. Greatness is forged not only in triumphs, but in conflicts. Ramsay's story reminds us that rivalry is not the opposite of respect. It is often its fiercest form. The man the world knows today was built as much by his enemies as by his victories. So the question remains, which of these rivalries do you believe cut the deepest? Which scar defined Gordon Ramsay the most? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold chef stories, where the legends of cuisine are revealed not only through their triumphs, but through the battles that tested them. Because in the end, the kitchen is not just where food is made, it is where legends are forged.